Hello everyone. My name is Linda and I want to tell you a story that happened to my friend Mary. I named this story as, after I refused to pay for my sister's college, my family came to my birthday, give the money to our trust fund or we will sue you. I asked for time, and then at my stepmom's party I did something that made her yell. Well, let's go. My name is Mary, and looking back, I can say my life completely changed when I was just 13. That's when my mom died in a car accident. One day she was there making breakfast and asking about my homework, and the next day she was gone forever. Dad took it really hard. I mean, really hard. He loved my mom more than anything in this world, and when she died, it was like part of him died too. He started crying all the time, couldn't sleep, barely ate. He'd just sit in his chair staring at nothing for hours. I was grieving too, but seeing my dad fall apart like that scared me more than anything. The doctor said Dad had severe depression and needed help. So he started going to therapy once a week. Every Tuesday at 3 p.m., he'd drive to Dr. Peterson's office and sit there for an hour talking about Mom. But after a whole year of this, nothing really changed. Dad was still walking around like a zombie, and I was basically taking care of myself. That's when Dr. Peterson suggested something different. He told Dad about this support group for people who had lost someone close to them. It met every Thursday evening at the community center downtown. Dad wasn't too excited about it at first, but I pushed him to try it since therapy wasn't working. So he started going to these meetings. And you know what? For the first time in over a year, I saw a tiny spark in his eyes when he came home. There was one person he talked about more than the others. Her name was Linda, and she was maybe 28 or 29. Dad said her fiancé had died in some terrible accident just months before their wedding. 3 months, that's how long it took from Dad meeting Linda at that support group to them standing at the altar getting married. 3 months. I barely knew this woman, and suddenly she was my stepmother. The wedding was small, just a few people from the support group and some of Dad's work friends. Linda wore this white dress that probably cost more than my school clothes for the whole year. She had this perfect smile and kept touching Dad's arm and calling him honey and sweetheart. The wedding happened, and suddenly our quiet house was filled with Linda's stuff, fancy perfumes, expensive clothes, dozens of shoes. She redecorated Mom's kitchen, threw away Mom's favorite coffee mug, and moved all of Mom's pictures to a box in the garage. We need to make space for new memories, she told Dad when I asked where Mom's pictures went. A year later, Linda had a baby, Emma. Dad was over the moon, acting like this was the first baby ever born. He spent all his time with Linda and Emma, buying them everything they wanted, taking them on trips, basically forgetting I existed. I started spending most of my time in my room or at friends' houses, or at Grandma's, Dad's mother. When I graduated high school, I couldn't wait to get out of there. I got into a decent college about 3 hours away, and Dad agreed to pay for tuition. The rest, food, books, living expenses, I had to figure out myself. So I got a job at this little cafe near campus called Murphy's. I worked there almost every day after classes, serving coffee and sandwiches to other students. The money wasn't great, but it was enough to keep me fed and buy my textbooks. This went on for years. I graduated, got a job at a marketing firm, rented a small apartment. Dad kept paying for things when I really needed help, but we barely talked. I knew Emma was growing up, but I didn't really think about her much. Then, when I turned 32 and Emma was 17, everything changed. My grandma died suddenly of a heart attack. Grandma had always been kind to me, even after Dad remarried. She never really liked Linda, though she tried to be polite about it. The funeral was awkward. I sat with Dad, Linda, and Emma, but we barely spoke to each other. It felt like sitting with strangers. After the service, Grandma's lawyer pulled me aside for a private meeting. That's when I found out that Grandma had left me everything. Her house, all her savings, her investments, everything. She didn't leave a single penny to Dad. The lawyer said she'd updated her will just 2 years ago and was very specific about her wishes. I was shocked. The house was beautiful, a 2-story Victorian in a great neighborhood that Grandma had lived in for 40 years. And the money, well, let's just say it was enough that I didn't have to worry about working for a while if I didn't want to. Dad was furious when he found out. Not at me directly, but I could tell he was upset. Linda looked like someone had slapped her. But legally, there was nothing they could do. Grandma's will was solid. So I quit my apartment lease and moved into Grandma's house. 6 months passed peacefully. I kept working at the marketing firm, but now I could afford to be pickier about projects. I started fixing up the house, painting rooms, updating the kitchen. Life was good. Then, out of nowhere, my phone rang. It was Dad. He hadn't called me in over a year. "Oh, hi Dad, is everything okay?" "Yes, everything's fine. Linda and I were wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner this weekend." A family dinner. It's been too long since we've all been together. Something in his voice seemed off, but I was curious. Maybe losing his mother had made him want to reconnect with me. So that Saturday, I drove to Dad's house, the same house I'd grown up in. Linda answered the door with a big smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mary, so good to see you, sweetheart." Emma was there too. She was 17 now and looked so much like Linda it was startling. She gave me a polite hello but seemed uncomfortable. We sat down for dinner, and the conversation was strained. Everyone was being way too nice, asking about my job and the house. But I could tell they were building up to something. Finally, after dessert, Dad cleared his throat. "Mary, we need to have a very serious conversation today." My stomach dropped. Here it comes. Linda leaned forward with that fake smile again. "Mary, dear, we think you should pay for Emma's college tuition." I blinked. "What?" Dad jumped in. "You received a very large inheritance from your grandmother. It would be fair if you at least paid for Emma's education." I looked around the table. They were all staring at me expectantly. "How much money are we talking about?" I asked. Linda answered calmly, like she was discussing the weather. "Well, studying at Princeton usually costs in the range of $300,000. $300,000, I practically choked on my coffee. "Are you insane? I'm not paying for such an expensive education. Emma can choose a cheaper college." Dad's face got red. "Mary, you should help your sister. Emma's future depends on you now." That's when Linda lost it. She started shouting, "You're being selfish. You got a huge inheritance that should have gone to your father. The least you can do is share it with your sister." I stood up from the table. "No." I turned around and walked straight to the door. Behind me, I could hear Linda still yelling about how ungrateful and selfish I was. Dad was calling my name, but I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. So that's what this was about. Not reconnecting with family. Not wanting to see how I was doing. They just wanted Grandma's money. A whole month passed after that disaster of a family dinner. I didn't hear a word from Dad, Linda, or Emma. Part of me was relieved, but another part felt hurt that they only wanted to see me when they needed money. Then I realized my birthday was coming up. I'd be turning 33 in 2 weeks. I decided to have a party at Grandma's house and invite some friends from work and a few neighbors. But then I had a crazy thought: what if I invited my family too? Maybe having other people around would keep things civil. So I called Dad and invited them. He seemed surprised but said they'd definitely come. The day of the party arrived. My friends came around 7, and Dad, Linda, and Emma showed up around 8. They brought a huge box wrapped in beautiful gold paper. We ate and talked for a while. Everything seemed normal until it was time for gifts. My friends gave me nice things: books, a plant, some wine. Then Linda stepped forward with that big box. "This is from all of us," she announced loudly. I opened it and found a stack of official-looking papers inside. "What is this?" I asked. Dad cleared his throat. Mary, you should sign these documents right now. This is an agreement for transferring your property to a family trust fund. The room went quiet, all my friends stopped talking and stared at us. I don't understand what this is, I said. And I'm not signing anything right now. We can discuss this later. Right now, we're having a party. The mood changed after that, but I managed to get through the evening. When people started leaving around 10, it was just me and my family in the living room. So, Linda said, settling into Grandma's chair. What have you decided about the agreement? I didn't have time to think about it today, I said. I need some time to make a decision. We're not rushing you, Dad said, this is a standard agreement. Many families have trust funds like this. Nothing terrible will happen to your property and money. But what does it mean? I asked. Would I lose control of my own assets? It's just a simple transfer of authority to manage your money, Dad replied. Linda would be the founder of this trust fund. It's really a fair decision. Linda leaned forward with her fake smile. Mary, if you don't agree to sign this excellent agreement, we'll have to sue you to challenge your grandmother's will. The most profitable option for you is simply to sign these papers. I stared at them both. I'll think about it and let you know. Linda's smile got wider. Don't think about it for too long. After they left, I sat alone staring at those papers. I wasn't going to think about signing them at all. But I knew I needed to buy time and gather evidence to confront them properly. That's when I remembered something. After Grandma died, there was a whole cabinet full of her documents that I still hadn't sorted through. And I remembered something else, something Grandma had told me before she died. Mary, she'd said, if you ever have problems with your father about the inheritance, look in the old closet in the living room. Find the large colorful box. At the time, I hadn't understood why she'd say that. I had no problems with Dad about inheritance, so I never bothered looking in that closet. But now things were different. I went to the living room and opened the old wooden cabinet. I pushed aside photo albums and old magazines until I found it, a large box covered in bright floral paper. My hands were shaking as I lifted it out. Inside, on top, was a receipt for private investigator services. Below that was a large white envelope with my name written on it in Grandma's handwriting. I opened the letter with trembling fingers. My dear Mary, it began, your mother was a good woman, and I loved her dearly. But your father's second wife turned out to be a liar and a fraud. I never trusted her, and I was right not to. I kept reading, my heart pounding. I hired a private detective to investigate Linda. He found out that she has been dating her lover for many years. The evidence is in the next envelope. I grabbed the second envelope and opened it. Inside were dozens of photos of Linda with some man I'd never seen before. They were kissing, holding hands, going into hotels together. There was also a flash drive labeled video evidence. But that wasn't all. At the bottom of the envelope was a DNA analysis report. I read it twice before it sank in. Emma was not my father's daughter. I went back to Grandma's letter, my hands shaking. I secretly conducted a DNA test using hair samples from Emma and your father. As you can see from the results, Emma is not his biological child. I always saw that your father was dancing to Linda's tune, and I knew that if I left my money and house to him, she would fraudulently take everything. The letter continued. The detective also discovered that Linda had no fiancé who died in a car accident. She specifically attended support groups looking for vulnerable, wealthy men who had recently suffered grief. She knew such men would be emotionally open and easy to manipulate. I thought about how quickly Linda had moved in on Dad, how she'd married him just 3 months after they met. There are unconfirmed reports that Linda plans to take everything from your father and then disappear with her lover, Grandma's letter concluded. Suddenly, everything made sense. Linda's expensive shopping trips, her constant visits to beauty salons, her dinners at fancy restaurants with girlfriends. She'd quit her job the day she married Dad and never worked again, living off his money while cheating on him. I gathered all the evidence, the photos, the flash drive, the DNA results, the detective's reports. Now I just had to wait for the right moment to use it. A week later, my phone rang. It was Dad. Mary, have you made any decision about the trust fund? I took a deep breath. Actually, yes. I'm ready to discuss it, but I want to do it properly. How about at Linda's birthday party next week? I'll bring the necessary papers there. That sounds perfect, Dad said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. We'll look forward to seeing you. After I hung up, I called my friend Jake from college. He was a lawyer now, working at a firm downtown. I'd kept in touch with him over the years, and I knew I could trust him. Jake, I need your help with something, I said. It's about property rights. I explained the whole situation, the trust fund documents, Linda's threats to sue, everything except the evidence I'd found. I wanted to see what he'd say just based on what they were trying to do. This is obvious coercion to transfer property rights, he said immediately. What they're doing is illegal. They could face serious consequences for trying to force you to sign over your assets. Would you come with me to a family gathering? I want you to explain this to them properly. I'll be there. Saturday arrived, and I got dressed carefully. I put on a nice dress and did my makeup. When Jake picked me up, he looked handsome in his suit. We'd always been just friends, but I could see how people might think we were dating. Ready for this? He asked as we walked up to Dad's front door. As ready as I'll ever be. Linda opened the door wearing an expensive-looking black dress. Her face lit up when she saw Jake. Mary, and who is this handsome man? This is my friend Jake, I said. I hope it's okay that I brought him. Of course. Any friend of Mary's is welcome. I could see Dad and Emma in the living room with about a dozen other people. Linda had invited her usual crowd, women from her book club, neighbors, some people I didn't recognize. Everyone was drinking wine and chatting. Jake and I mingled for a while. He was charming and polite, asking people about themselves and complimenting Linda on her party. Several people asked if we were dating, and we just smiled and didn't give direct answers. After we'd eaten dinner and had some cake, Linda stood up in the middle of the living room. Everyone, I have an announcement to make, she said, tapping her wine glass with a fork. My wonderful stepdaughter Mary has something special to share with us tonight. All eyes turned to me. I felt my stomach clench. Mary has decided to create a family trust fund, investing all of her grandmother's inheritance. We're so pleased with her generosity. People started clapping and saying congratulations. I stood up slowly. Actually, that's not exactly what I'm here to talk about. The room got quiet. Linda's smile faltered. You see, I continued, I've discovered some interesting things about my family recently. I reached into my purse and pulled out one of the photos, Linda kissing her lover outside a hotel. For instance, I found out that Linda has been having an affair for years. Linda's face went white. What are you talking about? I also discovered that Emma isn't my father's biological daughter. Dad stood up abruptly. Mary, what is this? And I learned that Linda never had a fiancé who died in an accident. She specifically targeted support groups to find vulnerable men with money. The room was dead silent now, everyone was staring at us. Furthermore, I continued, Linda and my father have been trying to force me to sign documents that would transfer all of my grandmother's property to a trust fund that Linda would control. Linda started shouting, this is not true. Mary has decided to slander me because she doesn't want to share her grandmother's money. That's when Jake stood up. Excuse me, everyone. I should introduce myself properly. I'm Jake Morrison, and I'm a lawyer. You could have heard a pin drop. What Mary's stepmother and father are trying to do is illegal, Jake said calmly. Forcing someone to transfer assets through coercion and threats is fraud. They could face prison time for this. Dad's face was bright red. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Jake interrupted. Threatening to sue someone to force them to sign over their inheritance is a crime. Linda was screaming now, this is a blatant lie. I'm going to sue you for defamation. But I wasn't listening anymore. I looked around the room at all the shocked faces, handed the stack of evidence to Jake, and headed for the door. Mary, wait, Dad called after me. But Jake and I were already leaving, along with several other guests who looked horrified by what they'd just witnessed. 2 weeks later, Jake called me with news. Your father applied for a secondary DNA test, he said. The results came back yesterday. Emma is definitely not his biological daughter. I felt a mix of sadness and vindication. How did he take it? Not well, from what I heard. He told Emma he can't accept the situation and doesn't want a relationship with her anymore. That's horrible, she didn't know any of this. No, she didn't, but there's more news. Your father filed for divorce. A few months later, the divorce was final. Linda tried to get half of Dad's assets and the house, but the court refused. The judge ruled that since she'd never contributed financially to the marriage, had been unfaithful for years, and Dad's house was purchased before their marriage, she wasn't entitled to anything. Linda was left with basically nothing. Her lover had apparently disappeared when things got messy, leaving her to face the consequences alone. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. Hello? Mary, this is Emma. I was shocked. I hadn't spoken to Emma since that disaster at Linda's birthday party. Emma, hi, how are you doing? I'm okay, I guess, her voice sounded tired. I wanted to call you because I need you to know something. I didn't know anything about this whole story with the trust fund and the inheritance. I never had anything against you. I sat down on Grandma's old couch. I know that, Emma. I never thought you did. I also want you to know that I never wanted to go to Princeton. That was my mother's idea. She kept pushing me to apply to the most expensive schools, saying we could afford it now that you had grandmother's money. What do you want to do? I asked. I got a full scholarship to the state college. I'm going to study education and maybe become a teacher. It's what I've always wanted. That's wonderful, Emma, I'm proud of you. There was a pause. Mary, I know our relationship will never be the same as it could have been if we'd grown up as real sisters. But I'd like us to be friends, if that's okay with you. I felt tears in my eyes. I'd like that too. Are you angry at me? For not being Dad's real daughter? My heart broke for her. Emma, no, none of this is your fault. You're an innocent victim in all of this, just like I was. Thank you, she said quietly, that means a lot. We talked for another hour. Emma told me about her plans for college, her part-time job at a bookstore, and how she was living with a friend's family since Linda couldn't afford to keep their apartment anymore. I told her about fixing up Grandma's house and my work. Can I visit you sometime? She asked before we hung up. Anytime you want, I said. A month later, my phone rang again, this time it was Dad. Mary, could we meet somewhere? I'd like to talk to you. We agreed to meet at a cafe downtown. When I walked in, I barely recognized him. He looked older, thinner, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down across from him. What did you want to talk about? He took a deep breath. I realized that I forgot about you when I married Linda. She fooled me completely, and she constantly turned me against you. I only recently understood how badly I behaved. I didn't say anything. I wanted to hear what else he had to say. I also realized that Linda was just using me all these years. She lived with me only for my money. Your grandmother acted wisely when she left all the property to you instead of me. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I want to try to fix our relationship, if that's possible. I know I was a terrible father after your mother died. I let my grief turn me into someone weak and stupid. I stirred my coffee, thinking, Dad, you chose Linda over me for 20 years. You let her treat me like I didn't exist. You tried to force me to give her my inheritance. His face crumpled. I know. I was completely under her control. She made me believe that you were selfish and ungrateful, that you didn't care about our family. I was grieving Mom too, I said. But you were so focused on your own pain that you forgot I lost her as well. You're right, I failed you as a father when you needed me most. We sat in silence for a few minutes. What do you want from me now? I asked finally. I want to try to rebuild our relationship. I know it won't be easy, and I know I don't deserve it. But you're my daughter, and I love you. I looked at this broken man across from me. He was my father, and despite everything, I still loved him too. It's going to take time, I said. I understand. But we can try. His eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Mary. That's more than I deserve. We started meeting for coffee once a week. At first, our conversations were awkward and careful. But gradually, we began to talk about real things. He told me about his regrets, about how lonely he'd been since the divorce, about how he missed Mom even after all these years. I told him about my life, my work, my plans for the house. I even told him about Emma calling me and how we were slowly building a friendship. She's a good kid, he said. I feel terrible about how I handled finding out she wasn't mine. It wasn't her fault. Maybe you should tell her that. Do you think she'd want to hear from me? I think she needs to hear it. 3 months later, Dad called Emma. They had a long conversation where he apologized for rejecting her and explained that his anger was directed at Linda, not at her. Emma forgave him, and they started talking regularly too. Now, 6 months after that awful birthday party, things are different. Emma visits me every few weeks, and we're becoming real friends. She loves helping me work on the house and garden. Dad and I are planning a trip together when I have vacation time. We want to visit the small town where Grandma was born and grew up. She used to tell me stories about it when I was little, and I think it would be good for us to go there together. Linda disappeared after the divorce. Someone told Emma she moved to another state, but we don't know where. Honestly, I don't care. I'm happy with my life now. Sometimes I sit in Grandma's garden in the evening and think about how proud she'd be that everything worked out. She saved us all, even from beyond the grave.